The rhythmic pitter-patter of the driving rain against the windows of Karen's house threatened to drive her mad as she paced around her room, brow thoroughly furrowed. It had been the worst hour of the worst day of her life, and now the storm outside sounded like it wanted to rip the shelter out from above her. Nature, life, and even the universe itself seemed to have it out for her. She made her best efforts to not dwell on the misfortunes that had befallen her, but instead vainly attempted to look to the future. Unfortunately, the future brought only her further disappointments, as it destroyed hope after dream after chance of salvation. Ruin and despair were her only companions, and only the inky void of nothingness seemed to welcome her with outstretched arms as her life spiraled ever closer to the brink of destruction. Hail now pelted the shingled roof, and Karen's house was filled with a raucous noise. She couldn't take it anymore. She just buckled under all the pressure surrounding her and collapsed into a ball on her bed. Her sobs were muffled by the sounds of falling ice, the crudely howling wind, and the slamming of rain against her windows. Her thoughts were consumed by those of hopelessness and despair. Nothing, she imagined, nothing but sorrow and misery could come from life at this point. Suddenly, a brief yet bright light filled her room. Crash! A loud explosion not too far from her rural home rocked the house's foundation. Karen jolted upright, awash with fear. From her window, she could see the woods were on fire. By this time, the hail had passed, and the only threats to her body were the wind, rain, and occasional strikes of lightning here and there. She wasn't worried, though. She reasoned that if she had made all the best choices in life and still everything fell to pieces, then making the worst choices could only benefit her now. She grabbed her umbrella and foolishly headed out toward the source of the explosion and fire. The closer she got to the edge of the woods, the more the destruction became apparent. Trees had been shattered and flung in every direction, marking the landscape with huge pieces of wood and jagged bark. The stench of horribly burnt fur and animal flesh pervaded the air once she broke into the woods proper. All around her, she could hear the panicked cries of animals echoing across the loud, popping noises of burning lumber and further falling trees. She was not afraid, though. At this point, she readily welcomed death, though she would not be the one to willingly deliver it unto herself. That, she reckoned, she would force upon life itself. Deep into the heart of the burning trees and broken landscape, there was a glowing rock resting comfortably in an impact crater. It sizzled softly with every odd raindrop that contacted its surface. As the trees above her were doing a decent enough job of blocking the rain from fully soaking her to the bone, she closed her umbrella and gently poked at the rock. With a soft whoosh, her umbrella went up in flames. The fumes of burning plastic choked her lungs, and she reflexively dropped it. Karen cringed, now defenseless against the rains outside the woods. Somehow, though, she found herself emboldened by this fact. Her sorrow had been replaced with boldness, and then that was replaced with abject anger. Anger. Nothing but anger. Despair fled in fear as she turned to reject everything the world had left that was not already lost to her. She cried out in passionate fury, and the force of her voice and conviction drowned out all sound around her. Rage clouded her vision and her judgment. She trembled with the force of the hateful thoughts that filled her mind. Wanting nothing more in that moment than oblivion's kiss, she reached down and grabbed the meteorite with both hands, whose surface churned with oranges and reds as it radiated intense heat. She screamed, but not out of pain, rather surprise. She felt nothing. Her hands were not burned by the now placid surface of the rock that she held fast. Her heart no longer burned with fury or was consumed by despair. She felt, simply put, nothing. The rock crumbled in her hands, leaving behind a pile of dust and a small handful of softly glowing, gelatin-like ooze, the curious color of which was almost blackish purple. It stuck to her hands and fingers, and no matter how she moved them around, the goo held fast. She couldn't be bothered to make any further attempts to extricate her hands from their inky prison. She trundled out of the woods, fully expecting the rains to be able to wash her hands. However, she found there was no rain falling. There were no clouds. There was just muddy ground and her house in front of her. No stench of flames or burnt critters. No tree fragments. Just a backyard and the house. She looked back at her hands, almost as if to question the reality of everything. They were still covered in the strange substance. Shrugging, she marched her way back to her front door, and her footsteps issued soft, squelchy noises as she went. She reached for the doorknob, but heard a noise come from behind her. It was the sound of somebody walking toward her. She almost gave herself whiplash as she turned her head. There was no one and nothing there, just empty, wet grass. She cautiously turned back to the door, only to notice that her hands were clean. Now the universe was just screwing with her, she thought as she stepped inside her house. She went to her room and changed out of her wet clothes. When she exited the bathroom, she saw that the same pile of goop had placed itself in the middle of her bed. It shifted uncomfortably, and her vision began to tremble as it did so. She clutched the sides of her head as her brain felt like it was about to explode. She had suffered severe migraines before, but this was making her eyes feel like they were going to burst from some external pressure. She fell to the floor, her crumpled form writhing in agony.
"Do not despair, little human. I have come to grant your wish of oblivion's embrace."
Karen knew not from which direction the voice came, as it sounded like it was resonating from inside her very mind, but she had a clear idea of who, or what, was talking to her. She very sluggishly lifted her gaze from the floor to the blob on her bed, her eyes shaking from side to side and struggling to focus on the glowing thing on the bed.
"You fed me, Mother. You embraced me at my birth. You gave me your fears, your hatred, your loathing. You gave me everything. Except I require one more piece."
Karen held her arms toward the towering mass of undulating purple slime. If this creature offered her a swift death, she welcomed it.
"I will fulfill your dreams of scouring this world. You must only embrace the void. Become one with me, Mother. Together, feed me your soul."
Karen forced herself to her feet and began to wobble toward the voice, now blinded by pain. Her hands touched the sticky surface of it, and she pushed forward until she was engulfed completely. Her mind was very painfully, yet also very swiftly, torn apart along with her physical form. The amorphous mass shuddered, and pieces of furniture splintered under the pressure it exerted as it began to transform into a more human-like figure. A second loud explosion rocked the quiet rural town as the creature that had fallen from space completed its transformation into a cruel, albeit accurate, clone of Karen by rearranging atoms to build what amounted to a skin suit. The creature, now content to refer to itself with the human name, examined its new appearance in the shattered remains of a mirror in the bathroom. "Very good," it spoke, testing out its new vocal cords. "No. Human voice. Disgusting. No matter." Karen walked out of the ruins of her house and began to head toward the nearest town, Girton. "Soon, this world will be ruled by us. Soon," she said as she looked toward the stars. "Soon, they will feel the terror of the Starborn Ones."